So hello friends, welcome to Network Jagat. Myself Debasish Chakraborty. I'll be I'll be giving you a training on Cisco ASA Firewall administration. So this training curriculum consists of some around 18 to 20 video sessions where I'll be touching several topics. Those topics are fundamental for any kind of firewall. At the same time, certain topics will be there which are unique for Cisco ASA, right? So let me first show you the topics that I will touch in this video tutorial series. So these are the topics. So first we have firewall theory, then firewall practical, then access control list, or in short ACL theory, then ACL practical, then network address translation or NAT theory, NAT practical, virtual private network VPN, then object group, then static root, secured OSPF, secured EIGRP, SLA or full form is service level agreement, transparent firewall, then ARP inspection. ARP stands for address resolution protocol, inter VLAN filtering, website filtering, modular policy framework, failover, shun command, and finally firewall management by telnet and SSH. Right, SSH stands for secure shell. So roughly these will be the topics which I will touch, and they'll be having their respective videos, and plus if time permits, I'll be touching on some other topics also which will be provided in separate videos that will be obviously packaged into this tutorial series, right? So that won't be any separate series. If I am creating some new videos apart from these 18 topics, I'll be definitely putting them into this series itself, right? So no issue of buying a separate series. So let me first tell you the significance of these topics. Firewall theory and firewall practical, obviously we must learn them, because in these areas we have discussed the most fundamental features of any firewall, right? Every firewall, be it coming from Cisco, or if it is a Palo Alto or FortiGate, whatever be the case, it has certain features which are common. And even if you are considering the firewalls, the software firewall solutions like the Windows firewall and antivirus firewall, they all have these features in common. So we must learn them, otherwise we will not understand what a particular firewall is actually doing. And I also have kept in mind that as my students are coming from different levels, so they may be freshers, or they may be mid-level executives, or they may be very highly qualified professionals. So keeping all of these levels in my mind, I have designed my syllabus. So for the freshers at least, I need to go through these two first lessons, right? Then ACL theory and ACL practical. At the heart of every firewall there is access control list, or ACL, right? So what is actually an ACL? ACL is nothing but certain rule sets based on certain criteria, and our device, when we actually apply the ACL on that particular device, or rather when we train up our device with an ACL, it behaves according to the instructions which are providing into that ACL, right? So these ACLs are certain specification rules based on certain criteria, which is very, very important if we are going for any kind of firewall activities, because firewalling is nothing but filtering, isn't it? So whenever we are filtering something, we need to have ACL, right? And even if you are considering the software firewall solutions like Linux IP tables or say Windows firewall, at the bottom of their codes, what exists is nothing but access control lists. Then NAT theory and NAT practical. NAT you people know, which is network address translation, that is translating the private IP addresses into public IP addresses and vice versa. So we need to learn those features for firewall when we are putting the firewall as the gateway or the perimeter firewall, right, or the perimeter security firewall. In fact, every firewall in most of the cases actually stands at the gateway position, right? Because whenever something regarding firewall comes into our mind, we think about Cisco ASA Firewall or FortiGate or Palo Alto, which are nothing but device level firewalls, right? We don't consider Windows Firewall or Linux IP tables in that case. Why? Because whenever we are considering firewalls, we think of certain device or certain system which is actually providing a security for our network, isn't it? So that means you have to place that system at the gateway point. So whenever we are putting it at the gateway point, we need to do certain kinds of address translation also, because that firewall will be connecting a private network with the internet. So there is a definite requirement for an obvious requirement for address translation. So we need to learn the NAT theory and NAT practical for firewall. Then VPN. In fact, VPN and firewall, you can consider these two as the two main security foundations, right? The entire world of IT security lies on these two foundations, VPN and firewall. Firewall is basically a local system, right? Whereas VPN can be considered as a spanned system, right? Once again, I repeat, firewall is a local security system, or rather a localized security system, which is staying at a particular place, be it a software firewall or be it a hardware firewall. It is having its existence at a particular place, whereas VPN is basically a security system that spans over a large area, right? So in that way, VPN has to be actually implemented with the help of firewalls or with the help of certain devices. You can't just have a VPN out of nowhere. So whenever we are thinking about VPN, it should be spawning out from certain types of firewall or certain types of devices. We can spawn a VPN from a router or spawn a VPN from a firewall. So we should be learning how to create a VPN connection between firewalls. Then object group. So what is an object group? See, in case of a large firewall system, we need to apply the same policies and same treatment for a several group of several bunch of entities, right? Say for example, we want to provide the same type of security for some 100 networks, right? So in that case, instead of specifying separate policies for separate 100 policies for all those 100 networks, we can bunch those networks into a particular group and then apply our policy on that particular group. So this is called object group. This actually shortens the coding to a very large extent, redundant coding to a very large extent, which is definitely a beneficial fact for the administrator as well as for the device itself, right? Because if our coding is very lengthy, then the hardware device will have to process very lengthy lines of codes, right? So for that reason, object group is a very handy solution. Then static root, secured OSPF and secured EIGRP. Obviously, if we are going for a network level firewall or the firewall which is guarding our perimeter, it is most obvious it is a gateway firewall and it is a router mode firewall. So we need very often we need to configure the routing routing configurations over there also. So routing configuration means like we can configure static route or OSPF or EIGRP. In fact, we can configure different routing protocols in the firewalls. But here, as we are not actually focusing on routing itself, I have just mentioned these three topics for routing: only the static route, secured OSPF, and secured EIGRP, right? Then SLA or service level agreement. This is also very, very important if we are considering the customer companies, because if the network company is providing the customer company with firewall support or security support, then at the same time it should also arrange for a service level agreement. That means the firewall should be providing service according to certain agreement, right? And if and this particular thing, this service level agreement, is very, very important nowadays, because in today's internet it is not at all very difficult to provide very high speed fiber optics bandwidth, right? But what is necessary is the security and the sustenance of that bandwidth. Right now I am telling that yes, I am giving you 100 Mbps connection, or I am giving you some 50 Mbps connection, but within a short time that connection falls back to say a 10 Mbps. So this kind of rather deviation from the service levels or these agreements, the service agreements, is not at all desired, and which can very easily ruin the business of the provider companies. So we must learn how to provide the service level agreements to our customers if we are the security providers for the customers. Then transparent firewall. Now this transparent firewall, ARP inspection, and inter-VLAN filtering, these three are actually related topics. Why? Because in all these three cases we are actually placing the firewall in place of a switch, not in the place of a router. If we are placing it as a router, then the firewall can be doing a NAT for us, can do routing for us, definitely will provide gateway for the hosts. But if we are providing it inside our network, that means in the position of a switch or a hub, then it will be having certain other separate functions which are done by a switch or hub. Rather a switch. A hub is definitely not doing anything, it's a dumb device. So here, when we are placing a firewall in place of a switch, and when it is providing the intra-network security, intra-network, not the inter-network security, it is providing a security inside my own network between the different hosts individually. At that time we are calling it a transparent firewall, right? It is also called bridge mode firewall, and at that particular time it should be doing ARP inspection, obviously. If it needs to stop certain kinds of threats or certain kinds of malicious activities from inside the network, it must do ARP inspection. That is address resolution protocol packet inspection. And inter-VLAN filtering, obviously inter-VLAN is not putting your firewall inside a particular network, because in that case you are partitioning your network into some things which are called VLANs. So when we are positioning that firewall at the junction point of all those VLANs, and we need to filter the traffic which is moving between the different VLANs, we are going for inter-VLAN filtering. Then website filtering. This is a very, very interesting topic, because in most of the cases, whenever for the basic level firewalls, we actually filter on the basis of IP address, which is actually the packet filtering process, where the main filtering criteria is source IP address and destination IP address, plus we can also specify the transport layer protocol. That's all. But filtering a particular website on the basis of its name, right? That is a very interesting thing, and that's a very useful thing also, because if you consider websites like YouTube and Facebook, they are available from different IP addresses. So just by blocking a particular or some specific IP addresses, if we want to block Facebook or YouTube, it is not at all effective, right? So if we want to block Facebook or YouTube altogether, what we need to block is that URL which contains the keyword facebook.com or youtube.com, right? So that is actually website filtering. It's a very interesting topic and very useful topic also. Then modular policy framework, where we are actually this is actually some kind of creating policies on the basis of certain modules. So what happens is, whenever we need to do some additions and alterations, we just need to modify a particular module. It's not a question of modifying the entire coding, right? If you are not using the modular policy framework, what will happen is, if we need to modify something, if we need to delete some policies or some criteria, we need to do it from the scratch. But if we are going for modular policy framework, we just modify or do some little additions and alterations at the separate modules, and the change will take into effect. The change will be affected in all the other different modules. Then failover, very, very important, because if we are not offering a failover solution to our customers, then we are actually denying that customer from a 24/7 service, right? So definitely we need to have redundant devices, but these redundant devices must be 100% synchronized, and they must know each other, they must communicate each other, and most importantly, they must know that the present working device has failed and the backup device has to come up immediately. So this kind of understanding needs to be there, and this understanding, the mechanism, is called the failover mechanism. Then shun command, this is also a very interesting command that we will be doing for ASA only, because you will not find it into any other firewall solutions. And finally, firewall management by telnet and SSH. In fact, this is a topic that we can even do at the very beginning, that is managing how I am managing the firewall. So that management can be done by using a serial cable, right? And if I am sitting very near to that firewall, just like a router. Otherwise, if we are seated far away from the firewall, then we can use telnet and SSH to manage our firewall, Cisco ASA Firewall. So we should be just going through very simple topics of how to managing the Cisco ASA Firewall using telnet and SSH, right? So these are roughly the topics that we will be covering in our video series, and definitely I can add more. If I feel certain topics need to be added, then I'll be adding them. If I do not feel that if I feel that they are not so necessary, then I'll not go for that addition, and these topics will be sufficient in that case. Certain things I would like to remind you, that is, first of all, ASA is not a very sophisticated and high level firewall in today's world, right? If you compare it with FortiGate or Palo Alto, they are far ahead of it. But Cisco ASA is such a product that if we have a knowledge regarding this, then mastering the other products from other vendors will not be difficult. In fact, you have seen it. Whoever has done networking, specifically the routing and switching part, you have seen that we all have to start with the Cisco products, right? So Cisco products, they have something which can lay the foundation stone for any certain kind of knowledge, and we can develop our knowledge in that particular field on that particular foundation which is laid by Cisco, right? So for that reason, Cisco ASA Firewall is an excellent product if we are really want to master firewall, if we want to be a master of firewall, because nowadays security is a very, very important thing, and the security jobs are very lucrative ones also. So if a person is just a master of firewall, that is, he knows different kinds of firewalls, Cisco ASA Firewall, Palo Alto, then FortiGate, and all these stuff, then that particular person is bound to have a very good position in the industry. So if that person wants to be a firewall specialist, it is always better if that person is starting with Cisco ASA. Number one point. So despite the fact that this is not at all a 5th generation or the latest generation firewall, in fact Cisco ASA is somewhat now backdated as compared to Palo Alto and that FortiGate, but still it is immensely useful to learn the basics of firewall, right? And I assure you, you will reap 100% benefit if you are going for Palo Alto and FortiGate after learning this Cisco ASA Firewall. If you are going it the other way around, if you are going to them without having a knowledge about Cisco ASA, then maybe you can find them a little bit difficult, right? So this is number one point. Number 2 point, I have designed this curriculum keeping in mind that my students or my friends, my audiences, my followers, they'll be coming from different levels, right? So this curriculum is developed keeping in mind the requirement and the standard of all these levels. I haven't when I'll be going through the topics in details, you will see that the topologies that I'll be designing and the way that I'll be delivering the lectures, they are actually targeted for the baseline learners, right? So if I can hit the baseline learners, then definitely the experienced and the highly skilled person, they will be also benefited. But if that's the other way around, that is, I am just preparing a video for the skilled engineers, then definitely the baseline technologists, they will be simply looked over, right? So I don't want that issue to happen with my videos. So that's why I have prepared this video series, keeping in mind all the levels who will be going through this particular video series, right? And third of all, we all are members of information technology, and as IT members, we cannot boast of being the supreme and knowing the maximum, right? Despite having experience of some 20 or 30 years, people will find them in a mess. People can very easily find them in a mess whenever it comes to new technologies. So I can very honestly confess that I have taught several individuals who are right now working in very well established and very well known MNCs. They were my students at one time, but nowadays they are on every other day, on each and every day almost, they are coming up with new topics which are unknown to me. That happens in case of information technology. You should be always on the lookout. So maybe I have certain topics or certain new developments on ASA Firewall that have come up recently. I may have missed them, right? So you people are always welcome. You people are always welcome. I don't have any issue on that. That if you are ready with some new information, you can very easily communicate that with me, and if possible within the time frame that is provided with this training session, if possible, I can definitely discuss those issues also, so that all of the candidates who are going through these video series, they'll be able to have at least some information that certain new technologies have come up, right? So that's all for this introduction video. In our website of Network Jagat, you will get my WhatsApp number and my email ID. Always feel free to come up with any suggestion, any complaints, any confusions and any new things that you know, right? I'm always ready to accept all those things, because my main objective, as well as the main objective of our Network Jagat community, is to satisfy all our students and to provide them with necessary knowledge, so that they will not get stuck up into their professional world and they will not face difficulty in their professional world, right? We are here to help you, and that's why we are also developing a lot. So we always remain careful that if certain additions and new additions need to be done in case of a existing video series, we readily do that. So any suggestion, any complaints, any new additions, any new inputs from your side is always welcome. I'm always available via my WhatsApp and my email, right? So it's very nice talking to you, and I'm also very happy to have you as my student, my follower, my friend. At the same time, I'm also very thankful to you people to have faith in me, and so that you have faith in me and you have laid down your trust for my teaching and my videos. That's why you have come across this tutorial series, right? So that's all for this introduction video. I'm very eager to see you from the when my actual class starts, and I'm very hopeful to see you in the subsequent classes when I'll be going through the actual administration of the Cisco ASA Firewall. Thank you so much for your kind cooperation and immense patience. Thank you so much. Bye for today.